in the Gemara on Tzadik Aleph, I'm an Aleph down in the Gemara about 15 lines. So Rava's answer to why the person was getting malchus and also having to pay the owner of the animal was because the payment was there was basically couldn't extract it from him, but he wanted to be Yotzi Yidei Shemayim. So that's what Rava says. Rava Omar Esnan Osra Taira. The Esnan is the payment that a person gives to a Zaina. It was then an animal, and it could never be used as a korban because it was used to pay a Zaina. And that's Osra Al Taira to use to be makdish it as a korban. Afilu Bo Al Imo. And they see here that if the person gave this animal to his mother as payment for it, even though he is chayav misa for having been boil his mother, he is. It's still that animal that he did. If he did give it, cannot be used as a korban. Why would it have the din of as an asna if he's going to be chayav misa? So this is Rava's proof that it was a typhus on the animal as a tashlum. It did get the din tashlum that, however, even though that when he offered it, when he did give it, however, if Beis Din would try to extract it from him, they never could because he's going to be killed. But if you gave it, it will get the din of an asnan, and which is tashlum, and that's what Rav is saying. And since when there is a chiyuv, it's chal the union of tashlum on something, even though sometimes it can't be extracted. To be Yotzi Yidei Shemayim, the person would want to give that. So, by to the Gemara. And that's why he's paying also. Rav Papa Omar, a third answer, Mishas, that the reason why he's paying both is because the chiyuv payment and the chiyuv malchus are coming at different times. That's why he's going to, it's not really kumle but Rav Mine, it's coming at different times and maybe and kind of for different reasons, and therefore that's why he's paying both. For example, Mishas Mashicha is chayav lo b'mezonaseh. When he rents an animal and he's moshech the animal, he then has to feed it. He has the obligation to feed it. So that obligation came on him when he first rented the animal, even though he hasn't yet muzzled it and been chayav the malchus, but he has the chiyuv to pay. So that's why he does have to pay. The milka lo lucky ad shas chasima, but the chiyuv malchus doesn't come until he actually muzzled it. And that's why he will have to also get malchus. Omer Papa, Hani Mili Boy Minai, Debei Rab Papa Bar Abba. The following two questions were asked to him, to Rab Papa, in the Beis Midrash of Rab Papa Bar Abba. And these are the two questions. And he said, he answered them, and he said that the psak on both of them was that it's asa. One of them was according to halacha that it should be asa, and the other one that alpi halacha, it's not asa, but he was like being machmir. In other words, he was saying, don't be mezalzel in the Indian. We'll see what it is. So the Gemara says, V'posh dai lohu isur. I said they were both asa. And chada kihilchasa, one was asa because that's the halacha. Chada dulav kihilchasa, and the other one is not asa al pi din, but he said it was asa because he didn't want people to be mezalzel in the Indian. So what were the questions? Boy, Minai, they asked for me, Mahu liloish es ha'isa b'chalav. The person asked, can we make milk bread? Meaning the water, instead of using water, we'll use milk. And he answered, and he said, it's also to do that. And that's the halacha. Because it's machshir people, because people usually think that bread is par when they can eat it with milchiks or fleishiks. So therefore, the Gemara will say, even if he will make it milchik, and he'll eat parva with it, which shouldn't be a problem, it'll still be asa. Says, and he's proving it from a brisa that's the halacha. The time we learn in a brisa, ein loshin esa isa b'chalav. You're not allowed to do lisha, use the milk for bread to make the dough. The im lash kolapas kula asur. And if he did do it, it all becomes asur. What does that mean? That means the reason is mipnei hergel avera. The kolapas asur means even if you'll eat it with parva and there shouldn't be a problem, it's still asur. And the reason is because hergel avera, because people are used to eating bread with either milk or meat all the time. Kiyotzelo, and also they asked them the same type of question, but ein tashin es tanur be'alya. You can't smear grease, certain grease that they smeared inside of an oven for some reason to make it get hotter. Oh, maybe that increase the heat, allowed it to get hotter. You can't use kosher tail fat because then anything you bake inside the oven will become fleshik. V'im tash, and if they would do it, so kolapas kula asur. So too, even if you would use it with fleshiks or with parva, it's still asur because you're not supposed to do that. And that was the hilchasa. You're not supposed to do that ad shiyasik es hatanor until you kasher the tanor by heating it up and burning out all the grease. The other kasher that they asked, he said it's also, but it wasn't kihilchasa. He was just being machmer to say that it's also. Be'idach, boy mine, they asked him, ma'u lahachnis min, v'she'eno mina ledir. Can you take two different species of animals and put them in, close them together in a corral? Is that like ravia, like colliding with animals, like interbreeding different species, just by putting them into the corral together? The Pashte Lahuli, so I paskin that it was usher to love Kilchasa. But that's not the halach. I was just paskining usher because I didn't want people, what Papa was saying, he didn't want people to be mizalzel a bit in the union of Raviyah. To Omar Shmuel, how do we know that the halacha is that it's not the halacha? Because Shmuel told us that the din is minafim ad sheyiru kiderech haminafim. When Adim are testifying that two people were together be'rayos. So what do they have to see in order to testify that there was a rayos? So Shmuel's quoting that they have to see them derech haminafim, that they have to be like lying together. That's enough. If they see them like that, that would be a testimony that they were over on a rayos. Even if they didn't see the Aver min enter the woman. However, and he continues, however, when it comes to animals, the kilayim, they're mixing, revia, mixing of animals in this way. It's testimony that they did, that this lab was, that the person was over on this lab, would not be until they actually saw the Aver min enter the nekeva. Ubekilayim, ad shiyachnis, until they testify that they saw the aver inside the nekeva. So that's what the Shmuel said. There we see that's the issur of Raviyah. Test that the aver was only being machnis the aver of a male animal, a zachar, into the nekeva. That's the issur of the Raviyah. But just putting them into the corral, the Ikar Din, is not the Isser. And so that's why it was Lo Kihilchasa when he told them not to put them in. He just didn't want them to be Mizalzel in the Indian. On this, we ask a question. Meisi Vrav Active Barami. Ilu Nemar, if the Pasuk had said, in reference to the Revius Behemos, mingling of animal species, if it had just said, in the Pasuk it said, Behem Techolo Sarvia, and hadn't said the word kalayim, because all pasuk reads, it says, "Eschukoy sevay in bayikra, eschukoy saita tishmoru, ubehem dechol lo sabia kalayim." And your animals, you shouldn't mingle them in a mixed species. And it goes on and talks about how the soda, the zriya, the seeding should also be mixed, different seeds, and also the issue of shadows. So if the pasuk had left out the word kalayim after the word behem techolo sarvia and left out kalayim, so what would we have thought you're not supposed to do? Behema, don't do sarvia. You would have thought that it's also, don't take your animals, even min b'mino, two animals, and hold them down when the zachar is coming on the nekeva. You would have thought. Rashi, the Gemara says, behem techolo sarvia. Ilu ne'emar, behem techolo sarvia, without the climb. Haiti Omer, lo yachois, odom habehema b'shasha oila ole zachar. I would have thought all the old isser is like holding the female in the nekeva when the zachar wants to mate with her. But that would be the isser. You're supposed to let them do it naturally and don't hold them. Person has the incentive, an owner has incentive to mate, to breed his livestock. He wants them to multiply, and he doesn't want them running away, the female running away. He wants them to get pregnant, or different types of pu'ulas he wants done with that. So you might have thought, that's the issue. Don't do it that way. Don't hold the female down. So again, you would have thought, Lo ya'achoz adam ha'behema b'shah she'oila alei hazachar. Therefore, the pasuk then told us, Talmud Loimer Kalayim. It's not talking about a min b'mino, the same species. With the Isser having to be just holding down. No, the Isser is with two different species. But nevertheless, we see that what seems to be the problem, holding down the female when the male is going on her and not letting the female run away. Because I guess either they have it from some other place, this idea of just it's holding, or because of the pasuk, seems to not mention anything more than lo sarvia, which we don't really know. It can either mean, when it says don't intermingle your animals, we don't know what they're referring to, either holding down the animal or actually taking and being machlis physically the aver min into the nekeva. It's either with one or two things. So at this point, we're under the assumption that holding the animal, the nekeva, is sarvia, even with kalayim. And this is the kasha because Shmuel's din was when it comes to the animals, intermingling of the animals, the whole issue of Revia is actually being machnis the aver into the nekeva, and we're asking from over here, it's not mashma, from that's the issue, it's more mashma, that it's just holding the animal, the nekeva, while the zachar is mounting her, and even with kalayim. So the more says, Talmud Lomer, kilayim. And love, and doesn't that imply love michlal to kilayim achiza nami? That with kalayim, there's also the issue of kalayim with just holding, because it doesn't, like we said, doesn't tell us exactly from the pasuk what is the issue, and when it doesn't tell us, we can assume that it's including everything. So now we see the kalayim should also be just holding down and not actually being machnes the aver. The one says no, for we can't use that as a kasha like on Shmuel, because we could just say that when we assume achiza holding, that can imply actually being machnis the aver into the nekeva of when one's working with his animals, doing that to his animals. Look, my achiza hachnasa could actually mean the actually putting the aver of the zachar into the nekeva. So why would they use such a lashon of achiza? I guess it's used in. Oh, it's the brisa. It's that brisa which Rabbi Askeguye Bar Ami was brought. They actually used the lashon of Yaakov. So then, what was the lashon of achiza then? If it means that we could actually understand that it means being machnis the aver, it's just a lashon of nakia, lashon nakia. My achiza hachnasa. So my kari la achiza. Why are they calling it achiza? Lishnamaya, a nice lashon, a nice way of saying it. So therefore, it's we don't kasha on what Shmuel said that actually Revia is the machnis of the aver into the nekeva. Omar Rabbi Yehuda min b'mino muter lahachnis kimichol b'shufik feres. That's like a little mascara container where the little brush goes in and you pull it out. So Yehuda says that the gabi min b'mino, two animals, an owner can mamish be machnis the aver of the zachar into the nekeva. There's not a problem. Min b'mino, like there's no problem with it. Why would you think there's a problem with it? It says right? You might think there's a problem with it because of pritzusa, because the person is supposed to be merachek himself from called over not to bring himself to a matzavim where he can have hirhurim. So where Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that you don't have to worry about hirhurim either. That's just Gemara explains why not. My timer, the abidah say tari, because it's like the farmer who's mating his animals, he doesn't have Yeruim. He's busy with his work. It's like work. I mean, it's effort and it occupies their mind. He asked a similar question again. Ilu, the pasuk that we had before, Ilu ne'amar behemtecho lo sarvia, and we left out the kilayim, we could have thought something else also. Haiti omer lo ya'achoyz adam esa behema kidei shiyale ole zach. We could have thought that that's the yisur. Don't hold the keva down in order that it should the zachar will come over to her and then mate with her. That's the yisur. So then we heard that's not how we're supposed to learn. Talmud Lomer Kalayim, that it's not talking stam. It's talking with min b'min. We're talking about it's two species, two different meaning. Kalayim, don't do that with Kalayim. But nevertheless, we're not talking about being machnis the aver. Even over there, in this like memra, we're just talking about holding it again. So Kalayim hu the asa. So we see over there, what's asa? Kalayim is asa. And we're talking about achiza, holding. Ha min b'mino, mashma, that if it was just the same min, that it would mamash be mutter to hold and let the zachar come on the nekeva. Shari. And what do we sing? That when is the min b'mino mutter? Min b'mino nami achiza in achnasalo. And from here, when we're allowing the min b'mino, we're only allowing it in the way that we brought it down here, which is for all we know, it's just achiza. Actually, because he brought it down, the word achiza in his brisa also before. So we're talking about, when we do say min b'mino is mutter, it's with achiza, which is there. Kasha and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that it's no problem even to be machnas the aver to the nekeva mamish. So here we have a kasha of Yehuda. Gemara says, it's not going to be a kasha. My achiza, what do we mean by achiza when it was brought down in this brisa? Achiza achnasa means mamash achnasa, like Rabbi Yehuda said, and so it's not a kasha of Yehuda. But my kori lo achiza lishna ma'alya. Why did they call it achiza then? It was a nice way of saying it. It was a lishna ma'alya. Omer Rav Ashi, Hi Milsa, boy minai. The following was asked to him to be Rav. They say Ravna in the base ministry of Ravna. Reish Galusa was the Reish Galusa. Mahu, this is what they asked him. Mahu lahachnis min b'mino v'she'enu min ledir. What's the din? Can 3 animals, let's say, 2 that are the same min and 1 that's a different species, put into a corral? Is this allowed? What's the shaila? The shaila is: do we say that the 2 minim that are the same will focus on each other, and therefore, like, there's not really they'll ignore the other one, so there's not like really an inyan of Ravia at all? What do we say that there's no difference? This is what they asked Rav Ashi. The Keban in the base ministry of the Reish Galusa. Keban De'ika Mine. This is the Sveika. Keban De'ika Mine, since there is 2 of the same men, the Nikeva, Zachar ben Nikeva of the same men. So Basa Mine, Goyer, will they go after each other? Maybe even in a case like this, we should stay away from it. Like, don't be mezalzel in this either. And he answered, or Rav Ashi answered, so we said, don't do it. It was also not dilokil, because it was also not lefi halacha, but don't do it. Why? Because I guess maybe it was Imamish, it was asked to the Reish Galusa, Rabna. He said, don't do it because he had a budding that he knew that they might play around or whatever, and they would try to mate the 2 different species, and he shouldn't do it. He knows his avadim, and they might do that. So don't do it in that place. Something like a Mishnah. Now we're going back to the case of the poel that is working for somebody, and how he has the right to eat as he's working. Let's say we said that a person who comes to work in somebody's field has the right to eat, but what if he's only going to his work that he's going to, and it has to be eating as he's doing the malacha? What if his work though that he's doing is he's not using his He's only using his arms, he's not using his legs. Or the opposite, he's doing the work with his legs, but not with his hands. We'll see in a second why we should think such a thing. Even if, let's say, he goes and he uses his shoulders to do some work, and he leaves, he doesn't even use his arms and his legs. So according to Tanakama, it doesn't matter. He can still eat. The pasuk that said when he goes into the camera, his friend, and said that he can eat as much as he wants. That it applies to him also. It doesn't matter how he did the work, as long as he was doing the work. But Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda said that it does matter. Omer ad shiasib yodav v'raglav, until he does it with his hands and his feet. And Rabbi Yosef will see in a second. It's all because we had a hekesh between the choisim and the nichsam. We made before a hekesh between that which is muzzled and that which does the muzzling, to make the connection between the para and a person who is like the payal. Whatever dinim applied to the para, we applied it to the person and to him when he will be a payal. And that's why, if you look at the para, he's always doing the malacha. When is he allowed to eat? When he's doing his normal malacha of trampling, or when doing malacha, he's always using his four limbs. So too, that's why Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda learns that by a person also, in order to have the rights to eat, he has to be using all of his four limbs. By the Gemara. My time of the Tanakh that said that he doesn't have to use his four limbs. He can any way that he works, even if he uses his head, he's ready to be able to eat as he's working. My timer, when the Pasuk told us when a person will come as a worker into the camera of his friend and be working, and he had the right to eat. So what do these learn from that? Doesn't qualify in the pasuk what he's doing, how he does his work, and nevertheless it still gave him the right to eat. And that's the Tanakama shita, why he has the right always to eat no matter how he did his work. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad shiyase biyodad b'raglav, right? Like it said in the Mishnah. My time of the Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, ki shor. It has to be like shore. The person has to be like the shore. Ma shor ad shiyase biyodad b'raglav. And that was because, I think it's Rashi explained it. It was because of that hekesh between the choisam and the nichsam. That was the hekesh between them. Just as the shore uses all four of its limbs. So apoyel ad shiyase biyodo b'raglav. Right, the more goy rabba bar rab huna. Dash. What about? Okay, if you need that, it should, according to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, you need all four limbs. What if you're using for dashing an animal that only has two limbs? So that was the suffix. What if a person takes dash be'avuzin u'b'tanagolim? They only have 2 feet. I mean, if they would do the disha, would that be and a person would muzzle those animals? Would the be over on no Sachsom or not? Because they're not qualified. They're not fulfilling that criteria. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, that's Ashayla is in Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Mahu. What's the sveika? Was his point that the animal has, in order to be, that if one would muzzle him, he would be over on the lap? Is that because the animal, when he used his 4 legs, it was all of his koyach? And in which case, these birds are using all of their koyach. They just only have 2 legs. And they are using their full weight or their full koyach. Or do we need it to be just like them, but they were using their legs and for all 4 limbs? And they don't have 4 limbs. Tekus, they didn't answer that. I guess it wasn't some of Lamaisa to use chickens and geese for doing disha. Omar Rab Nachman, Omar Rabba Baravua. Poilim is a shaila. Poilim ad shlo hilchu shesi ve'er begat oichlin another the ain't choicing yain. Poilim, let's say they're doing wine stomping. So what they do is they have a big vat, and they throw the fresh grapes into it. And then they start stomping them. In the beginning, it's grapes, and there's no juice, there's no wine. And in the end, after a certain amount of time, which they're saying here is Shesi Ve'erev, walking up and back and over and back, cross and back. Then there'll be some juice, which will be like will be wine there already. So before they will produce any wine,
Grape juice.
right, it'll be grape juice, right? So before they will have walked up and back and over and back, side to side, they didn't really produce any liquid. And if they will eat, if you muzzle them and keep them from, so we're talking about a person here. He's allowed. Where does he's allowed? He's a payil. He's allowed to eat the grapes, but until he does Shesi Ve'erev, he's not even allowed to drink the juice, like on the bottom. If you take a straw, he wouldn't be allowed. That's not called eating the produce in which he's working with, because he's not, until there's juice produced, he's not called working with the wine. He's called working with the grapes. So therefore, he only has the right to drink the juice when he's already gone the Shesi Ve'erev, back and forth, from side to side. Sure. The ain shoisin yayin. But if you'll have already done that, then side to side, in front, up and back, then he can eat whatever he wants because it's considered he's working with the grapes and with the juice. Yayin, they call it.
Yeah, that's bothering me.
Because that's what it's ultimately going to be used for. It might not be wine now, but it's going to be wine, and that's why maybe they're calling it wines. Mm-hmm. But the Mishnah, like we're trying to point out that whatever the person's oisik in, that's what he's allowed to eat. And if he's not oisik in, and if he's oisik in one thing, he's not allowed to eat something that he's not oisik in. So, if he's oisik in figs, if there's a navim on the side, he can't eat the navim because he's not oisik in them. He's not picking them. It's only picking the figs. But and vice versa, you can't. He's oisik in the grapes. He can't eat the figs, even if the figs are right on the next to him. Or if they're on the other side of the field, right there. What he can do, if he's supposed to be working eventually on both types of crops, one after the other. That can mean two things. It can either mean here that if he's going to, he can hold himself back if he sees that the figs are better than the grapes. He can not eat and save his appetite for when he gets to the figs, like later in the afternoon, or it can mean that he's just working on the grapes and he sees that later he'll get to more ripe grapes, so he's not going to eat any of these grapes that he's working on now until he gets to the better grapes that he sees are much better. He is allowed to save his appetite for those and then eat more when he gets to the good grapes. It's not a problem with that. The chulan in all of this privilege that he has to eat these types of while he's working, the chulan lo omru ela b'shas malacha. It's only allowed at the time that he is working. That's when he's allowed to eat in all of these cases. However, there is a case where he might not be working, where they did allow him to eat. In the case where the bailing would be happy that he would then eat. When the person is going from one row and then he's transferring over to another row, he's not working at that moment because he's walking from one row to the next. But that's really the time when the owner would like him to be eating, because instead of eating when he's supposed to be working, the owner is happy that he'll take the grapes and eat them as he's walking. But that's not b'shas the malacha, so that's not d'oraisa, his heter to eat. That's only because it's a shavas aveda, because it's what the bailim really wants, because it's saving the bailim some work time. And also, because they're also let's say they finished with that, and he's walking back to where he's supposed to go, where he kept the locker room or something, and he is then, that's really when the owner would be happy for him to eat some grapes then, instead of while he's supposed to be stamping on the grapes. And with an animal, ubechamor, kishu porekis, when it's it was carrying a load of straw on the back or something, and then is now being unloaded, then that's also similarly, that's a good time for the animal to eat. More we'll talk about it. They ask, and the shaila here is, we just learned that you can only really eat what you're working with at that moment. But what if, let's say he's eating this geffen, and right next door, in the next row over, there's another geffen which has better grapes. Can he, instead of taking the grapes which he's picking and putting into the basket here and putting them into his mouth, can he go and grab from the adjacent row and take from those grapes? That's the shaila. Mao shiyocho begefen acher. Right. So what's the suffix? The min she'ata noisein lekelav shel balabayis bi'inan v'ha'ika. This is one side of the suffix. Do we say that the whole inyan here is that you should be eating from the same type of fruit that you're now picking and putting into the basket for the balabais, and that's where you have your heter to eat. And in which case he is eating from the same end because the row next door is also grapes. So then he would be allowed. Or maybe we say no, not from the min, but from the exact grapes that you're plucking and putting into the basket. Those you're allowed, instead of putting them into the basket, you're allowed to put them into your mouth. And then in which case, then you wouldn't be allowed to eat from the adjacent row. That's the sveka. So if we'll say, like the second side, that you're supposed to eat from those which you actually have in your hands, putting it into the basket, so you would not be able to eat from the row next door, then we would have a shaila. And because of the shaila, we want to say that there it must be that halachic is that you are allowed. We wouldn't understand the whole suffix. We wouldn't understand the second side. If we would say that you are not allowed to eat, that you have to eat only what's in your hand, putting into the basket, that's what that was the din, would have a suffix. So therefore, we have a problem understanding the second side of the suffix, how it can be. So the Gemara says, "V'intim seilomer oisei begefen ze lo yochal begefen acher." If you would say, like the second side, that you cannot eat from another, the next door row, because you're supposed to only eat from what you're exactly putting into the basket, then what do we do with the fact that we know that a shore, we already learned it, is mutter to eat from a chuber, meaning attached stalks. We know he can eat from talish because while he's doing disha, that's on the ground, it's already detached. We also learned that he can eat from a chuber, meaning as he's walking along, like pulling a plow or a cart, there's standing stalks, he can just munch on them. He's allowed. So then how can we ever have that he could do that if we see that you're only allowed to eat from the exact produce that they're putting into the basket? Because most of the time when they use animals, it's like in that way, the animals are harnessed to like a plow or to a cart. The person sits in the cart and picks and puts them into the cart, and the animal keeps pulling, is in front of the cart. So anything the animal would eat would not be the same produce that the man in the cart is picking off the tree. So how could he be, if that's what we required, how could it be that the animal is allowed to eat from what's in front of him? So begefen, the shore b'mechuber heichi ochel, how would he be able to eat? So Amarav Shisha, we could find that he would still be allowed to eat his mechuber, and we could still have our two studying of the suffix. Omer Rav Shisha Berei the Rav Idi b'sichra. We're talking about like a vine that extends along, very long, elongated, and when the man is picking the grapes, maybe, so in putting him to the karon, that same vine extends to the mouth of the animal, and that's where the animal would be allowed to eat from, because it's eating from the same vine that's being picked from. And then, so we don't. Then that would be understood, and we could still have the two studying of the suffix. So now we'll try to be patient the suffix then. Tashma, we have our Mishnah. We want to be patient the suffix from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says that if a person's oisek in figs, he can't go and eat the grapes that are next to him. He can't eat the anavim because, and vice versa. All right. So what is that? That pashtus, that means when we said in our Mishnah that you can't, and you're focusing on one, you're working on one, you can't eat the other. What that means is like if you're here, you can't eat the other fruit which is next to you there. So how would that apply? So there's a duke that we make. We say that so the diuk is that if you would take the same mashma, only if the thing next to you is a different fruit, you can't eat from it because it's not the same fruit min that you're working on right now. But what if the fruit next to you, and the row next to you, was the same min as what you're working on? Mashma that you would be able to eat it because it's the our Mishnah is just saying you can't eat when it's a different min. Lo yochal ha. In the same scenario, if it was the same min, in the same setup when you had ta'enim and anavim, meaning the row over would be the same min, the oichel you would be able to eat. And therefore, it would therefore have been poisher shaila that you can eat from the same min if it's even if it's the next row over. And if we would say that the side of the suffix, which is the second side of the suffix again, that you can't eat, that you cannot do that. Zvi amrat oisei begefen ze eino oichel begefen acher. Then what will we do with the diuk that we have in our Mishnah, which clearly says that you can? And if we would say like the second side of the suffix that says you cannot, we're stuck with the diuk from our Mishnah. Gefen acher. How could we find the case of our Mishnah? Omer Rav Shisha Berei the Rav Idi b'modilis. We're talking about therefore with this we will find the case of our Mishnah where where we said if you're dealing in figs you can't eat grapes, and we can still have the suffix of the Gemara. Why? Because when we say if you're dealing in grapes, you can't eat the figs, it's modelis. The figs are dangling down on top of the grapevine, right next to the grapes. And then you'd have to move the fig. You can't eat the figs because you're not oisikin. You're trying to pick the grapes. It's just that the figs are dangling down right there. But and then we could have it. We could have the diuk from our Mishnah. Then if the thing dangling down onto the grapevine that your person is working on are also grapes, then you could pick them, and that would be the diuk from our Mishnah. And we could still have the tut stadim of the Gemara. That what do you do with the row next door? Because we would say modlis is not talking about next door. It's talking about when it's dangling right there. Tashma, we're trying to be poished the shayla. Tashma aval monea es atzmo. We said in our Mishnah that a person can hold himself back. Let's say within grapes itself. Can hold himself back with these grapes now, save his appetite for the better grapes that he'll have in another hour when he gets to those other vines. Aval moneas atzmo ad shemagil lemakam hayafos. He can hold himself back until he gets to those, we said in the Mishnah. But oichel, and he's allowed to eat. V'i amrat, the first side of the suffix. V'i amrat oise begefen zeh. If we would look at the first side of the suffix, and where we were wondering if the person is allowed to eat from the next door vine, meaning if we said that all you have to have is the same min, you don't have to have the exact grapes that you're putting into the basket, those are what you're allowed to eat, you're just allowed to eat from the same min, then why would our Mishnah say you can go and bring them over here and eat them while you're eating these, while you're picking these grapes? That's what the one says. Nazel v'neisin v'neichel. You can eat them now. Just bring them over to where you are. And for the Gemara, the reason why that they're we might be having said, the Mishnah might have said, that you can eat them when you get there, not because you're not allowed to pick from the next door vine, but rather because we don't want the worker being mevatel from his malacha. Hasa mishum bitul malacha. Right. Hasa mishum bitul malacha lo kami boilan. That was because of mitul malacha. It wasn't even our shaila of whether or not. No, period. Where were we asking the shaila from our Mishnah when he had his wife and kids there that could bring him the better fruit over to him? That if the first side of the suffix in the Gemara was that you can eat from the next door, from the vine next door, next to him, then you should be able to bring it over to him, the better stuff over to where he's working now. His wife and kids should be able to bring it over to him now. That's what we were asking on our Mishnah. Can we boil it? Lo can we boil it? Right. Bittul malach. Lo can we boil it? That would be a case of bittul malach. What were we asking? Ki can we boil on heicha deika ishto v'bonai? Would they be able to bring it over to where he's working now, the better fruits? If we would say like the first side of the suffix that you're allowed to, that you're still allowed to eat as long as he's saying min. So my Tashma will try to bring a raya for that. The chulam in the Mishnah it also said the chulam lo amru el b'shas malacha. The only heter that we give to eat when he's working is at the moment when he's working. About we said, but when he's walking from row to row, there was an allowance. We call it a shavas aveda because we know the owner would want him to eat then. About mipnei shav aveda lebailim amru poilim oichlin behalichosan meuma leuma. We said in the Mishnah. Ubachazirasan minagat. So when they said this, the Talmidim in the base of Medrash thought Savrua that when they were walking, and this heter that it's like a Shavas Aveda, Savrua Mahalech K'oisei Maisadami. That walking was like working for the Balabayas anyway. Because you're doing it all for the Balabayas, you're walking over to his second row. And since that was like working, being Oisik, and so then umishum ashav aveda lebailim hu de'achil, and we thought that he wasn't really able. It was like working, but he wasn't able to eat at that moment because the grapes that he would be having in his hand would not be the grapes that he's going to work. He's going to work on the second vine, and the grapes that he would have would be from the vine that he just came from. So it might be like working, but he still wouldn't be allowed to eat them because it's not the grapes of the place that he's working from. So then why would he be allowed to? So it would only because of a Shavas Aveda, and it would only be a Durabanan that he would be allowed to eat. Midaraisa lo achil. And Alma, so we would see from there that Oisei b'gefen zeh eino oichel b'gefen achim. And that's what we thought. That the reason it would only be a Durabanan is because he really doesn't have the right to take from the one geffen to the next geffen. We call it work, that would be fine. But it wouldn't be considered that he's eating from what he's working at because he's working at the second vine that he's going to, not at the first vine that he left. And if we would consider that it's not going to be a heter achila because of eating as you're working, then it's only because of a Shavas Aveda. So that means that would be like the raya that you cannot eat from one vine to the next. Because if you're good, you're working and you're eating, and it would be considered that it's no problem eating from the vine number one over to the vine number two. Lord. So Alma. No, we would be saying that it must be that a durabanan. It's the only heter is a durabanan, and therefore a duraisa is not really supposed to be eating over here.
The rice says you can't eat, and the Rabbanan says you can eat. You can't eat because
No, but they're not eating because the only reason it's like a Shabbos Aveda. That's not that's something that the Bailim would want him to do. So therefore, it's not like they're saying you can, you're not supposed to be taking this and we're allowing you to take it. It's a Shabbos Aveda. It's something for the benefit of the owner. So he's allowing them to eat it for like a different reason other than the usual reason that workers are allowed to eat when they're working. He's allowed to eat return. It's returning like a lost object to the owner, which is also beneficial for the owner, but it's just like for a different reason, which is a rabbanan. So therefore we see that if that's the way they were learning, then it's that you cannot eat from the next door vine. Mahalach look mazadami mahalach, right? So savrua mahalach love. So they thought savrua again. We're up like 7 lines up from the bottom. Savrua mahalach ka'osim ma'asadami. They were like they were doing work. Why was it because of a Shabbos Aveda? Because the fruit that they were eating wasn't the right fruit of where they were working, because it was from the vine number 1. Therefore, we would answer our question: you can't eat from the adjacent vine. Mishum hashav Aveda lebailim hu de'achil midiraisa lo achil. So Alma, we would therefore prove Alma oisei begefen zeh eno oichel begefen acher. One says, "Lo, no, that's not the way we were thinking in the base of Midrash. Lo, lam ein malach, oisei begefen zeh, that by oichel begefen acher, that no, really we could answer like the first side of the suffix that you can eat from the adjacent vine, as long as it's the same min. Umahalech love ka'oisei ma'asadam, and when he's walking from one row to the next, it's not like he's working for the owner. That's why. It had to be because of a Shabbos Aveda, because you really wouldn't have been allowed to eat from any of that fruit because you weren't working for the owner. Because walking from one vine to the next is not called working. And another way they learned it was Savrua Mahalach Love Ke Oise Maisedami. Behind time the Midoraisa Lo Achil, and that's Midoraisa. They are not allowed to eat because they're not working at that moment. Why are they eating? Mishum Delo Ka'isei Maisa, because they're not working. Dami. So what is that? We would then make a diuk. What if they were working? So the whole reason why they had to, it was only because of a Shabbos Aveda, was because they weren't working. What if they were working? If they were working, then they would have been able to eat as their, it wouldn't have been a problem. Even if they were bringing from vine 1 to vine 2. They would have been able to eat midoraisa. So that would have been a diuk. Alma, that would prove, yes, that you can eat from the adjacent vine. One says, lo, even from that we have a problem. That you're not allowed to eat from the adjacent vine. And what did that say? And just that going from one vine to the next, you're really not allowed. And going from one place to the next is considered work, but you're not allowed to eat. You're eating from you're not eating from the place that you're working at. Weiter, so that's the suffix, and they're not paishet the suffix. The animal, when it is also can eat from mechuber as it's being unloaded, it's also can eat at that time. Kishiparekas, when it's being unloaded, mehechan achla, where would it be eating from? Rashi, the second line down, Kishihiporekas, when it's being unloaded, mehechan achla, where would it eat from? Kol masa porkin b'bas achas v'holchin. Whenever they take off a load, they just take it off in one shot. As they're taking it off, it's gone in 1 second. They take it off. And then he has nothing to eat from. What do you mean, as it's being taken off, you can eat? So, meheichen oichlen. Ema, so that rather, let's say like this. Ad shitehei porekes. Like, before they take it off, you can eat. And we learn like this. Tanya laha, the Tana Rabbanan, a chomor b'gmal, oichlen mimasui she'al gavehim. That if it has a load on it, it's allowed to eat from the things that are on its back. If it can reach around and grab it, it's allowed. As long as the person who's driving the animal doesn't like feed it from the food on the back with his hands, lemaisa. But if it will go and bend around and take it, it's allowed. That's one of the things that the animal is allowed to do. And we'll stop here.